the headlines, fears of weak demand and a glut in global supply continue to weigh on oil prices. The price of U.S. crude fell below the $50 per barrel mark. The search crews confirmed the discovery of tail section of AirAsia Flight 8501 in the Java Sea. If the right part of the tail section has been found, the flight recorders could be retrieved. And a former vice president of Korean Air was indicted Wednesday on charges of obstructing aviation safety law in her nut rage incident. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Chae-ri. Global oil indices slipped to below the $50 per barrel mark, setting another fresh lows not seen in more than 5 years. Experts say the downward trend is moving things toward a financial crisis in oil exporting countries, for example, Russia. Our Kim Min-ji starts us off.
Another oil shock. Global crude prices plummeted to fresh lows on Wednesday over mounting concerns of oversupply and sluggish global growth. Benchmark Brent crude temporarily fell below the symbolic threshold of $50 per barrel for the first time in 5.5 years. U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate also traded at less than $48 a barrel. Crude prices have slumped almost 10% this week alone and have lost more than half their value since mid-2014. Although the price cut could help growth for some economies, a joint analysis by state-run Korean think tanks is not ruling out the possibility of a financial crisis in countries that are heavily reliant on oil exports. The study added that financial troubles in these countries, such as Russia and Venezuela, could have spillover effects on emerging economies, including Korea, especially when coupled with a U.S. rate hike down the road. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
But despite those concerns, Korea's finance minister Park Geunhye disagrees. He says the drop could actually help the Korean economy by bringing down prices of imported raw materials and eventually perking up domestic demand. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Finance Minister Park Geunhye has dismissed concerns that falling oil prices could lead to deflation. In fact, he says the declines could actually help boost domestic demand as the prices of imports fall. At an economic ministerial meeting on Wednesday, Che said that the decline in oil prices is fundamentally different from deflation, which occurs due to a shortage of demand rather than an oversupply. He also cited projections from 5 state-run institutes, which forecast that Korea could save $30 billion in oil import expenses if crude prices maintain an average of $63 per barrel. His remarks came amid concerns that deflation is spreading in the Korean economy, currently struggling from sluggish domestic consumption and low inflation rate increases. Some local institutions in Seoul even compare the recession in Korea to that of Japan's long-term economic slump in the 1990s. In response, the finance minister said that the government would increasingly pursue policies to make sure the benefits stemming from falling oil prices help boost domestic consumption and thus the economic recovery. Also during the meeting, Che vowed to pursue policies that would boost financing from venture capitals and for high-tech innovative industries. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The finance industry was a once booming sector. It was an industry where you could easily make a fortune if you had the right qualities. But now it's become much more difficult to see people in this sector making big money, at least here in Korea. It's actually seeing people being let go a lot instead. Ji Myung-gil has this report.
Since the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the government has repeatedly set the ambitious goal of turning Korea into one of Northeast Asia's financial hubs. Yet latest government data shows the industry is in fact shrinking. Over the past 12 months alone, some 24,000 jobs have vanished from the country's financial sector. Statistics Korea said on Wednesday that the number of people working in the industry fell to 840,000, or about 3% of Korea's overall workforce. That's down nearly a half a percentage point and the lowest in 5 years. Despite the government's plans of turning the financial sector into a major growth engine, it only accounts for 5% of Korea's GDP, down from 6.5% in 2008. Industry experts attribute the decline to poor performances by stock brokerage houses that have been forced to cut back in recent years. Banks and life insurance companies have also sought mergers and acquisitions in the past year as part of restructuring aimed at sharpening their competitiveness. The job market for the financial sector does not look bright this year either. Financial analysts say that although the sector's performance will likely improve this year thanks to a steady economic recovery and the government's deregulation drive, many industry players will have to focus on overhauling their businesses to regain their competitive edge. Experts are calling on the government to speed up streamlining red tape to encourage the financial industry, to provide funds more easily to the corporate sector and reduce its reliance on providing household loans. Kim Hyung-kit, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geunhye will hold her New Year's press conference next Monday. It marks the second time she will be standing before Korean as well as foreign reporters since she took office nearly 2 years ago. Her office says President Park will unveil her 2015 policy directions that will focus on revitalizing the economy and her vision for inter-Korean relations. She will also have a Q&A session. And you can check out her New Year's press conference live right here on ARIRANG TV. Anti-Pyongyang leaflet launches by South Korean activists could come in the way of the two Koreas bettering relations once again. North Korea says it has no plans to engage in talks with South Korea as long as the launches continue. Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
North Korea warned South Korea on Wednesday to stop private groups from flying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border if it really wants to resume dialogue. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said South Korea is challenging North Korea's sincerity for improved bilateral ties and spoiling the mood for talks by turning a blind eye to the leaflet launches. 2 days ago, a group of South Korean activists flew 600,000 leaflets that criticized the North Korean leadership. Putting an end to the leaflet campaign was one of the preconditions to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's apparent proposal for talks in his New Year's speech. South Korea has refused to step in, saying it has no legal grounds to ban acts of freedom of expression. But Unification Ministry spokesperson Im Byung-chul said Wednesday the government will try to prevent the situation from getting out of hand.
We will cooperate with police in implementing safety measures to reduce possible dangers to the lives and property of our people.
A local court ruled Tuesday that authorities can restrict the leaflet launches if they jeopardize public safety. In October last year, North Korea opened fire across the border in an attempt to shoot down the balloons that were carrying the controversial leaflets. The Unification Ministry once again called on North Korea to accept its proposal for talks with no preconditions if it's serious about improving inter-Korean relations. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Local authorities have slapped charges on the former vice president of Korean Air, Cho Hyun-ah, on this Wednesday for her so-called nut rage incident. The Seoul prosecutors indicted Cho on charges of violating aviation safety rules and coercion and interference in the execution of duty. Cho stands accused of ordering a commercial airliner to steer back to the terminal gate in order to deplane a head steward after she was incorrectly served a bag of nuts. It's also alleged that she sent Korean Air officials to the head steward's home, demanding that he falsely testify about the incident before the authorities. Many new gadgets are grabbing attention of tech enthusiasts around the world at this year's annual Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. What's different about this year, though, is that cars are stealing some of their thunder. Connie Lee tells us why.
Take a look at what's driving this year's Consumer Electronics Show. Or should I say, take a look at who's driving.
Well, in this self-driving F-15 Mercedes-Benz, no one is technically driving. It just carried the president of CES to the show.
You know, it's a very odd feeling to totally give up the wheel to a robot.
The car uses radar and ultrasonic sensors to drive itself.
30 years ago, I was seeing these pictures and was dreaming of these kind of cars.
This car is not only able to determine when it's safe to cross the road, it also actively tells you when it is safe to start walking across.
Blue LED lights inside the white leathered interior signal touchscreens that control light and temperature, and you can even watch movies or hold video conferences sitting on these swirling chairs. Driverless cars are getting a lot of the attention this year, with Germany's Audi arriving to Las Vegas by itself from San Francisco. However, there are other automakers emphasizing their cars and their connectivity at the show. The Hyundai automobiles on display here come along with Hyundai's Blue Link smartwatch app. The voice-activated app allows Hyundai drivers to remotely start and stop the engine, lock and unlock doors, turn on the emergency lights, or call for assistance. And BMW has debuted cars that act as their own valet. After dropping off its passengers, these connected BMWs can park themselves on command from a smartwatch. However, the most anticipated technology for consumers may be the driverless car, which experts say could hit the market within the decade. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Now, the fiercest battleground for global TV manufacturers this year is going to be in Asia. That's according to research firm Display Surge that says the TV market of the Asia-Pacific region is projected to grow 7%, more than double the global average of just a little above 3%. Japan is forecast to have the highest growth rate of TV market at nearly 11%. The researcher attributed this estimated surge to the country's aging population, who spend more time watching television. Korea's trade surplus in industrial parts and materials hit an all-time high last year, reaching nearly $108 billion. The Trade Ministry says that exports in the sector rose almost 5% from the previous year to $276 billion, accounting for nearly half of overall exports. Industrial parts grew almost 6%, with electronic parts making up the biggest proportion of shipments, while materials rose 3%. Exports to the U.S. jumped 13%, to Europe 10%, and to China 4%. Korea and Colombia agreed on a free trade agreement nearly 2 years ago, but this pact has yet to be ratified in Colombia, mostly due to the country's auto industry opposing to this trade pact. Colombia's foreign minister was in Seoul this week to assure Korea that this deal would be finalized very soon. Connie Kim reports.
Korea will soon have greater access to Colombia, the third largest Latin American market, and its population of 48 million. Wrapping up her two-day visit to Seoul on Wednesday, Colombian Foreign Minister Maria Angela Olguin met with Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and pledged to speed up ratification of the Korea-Colombia FTA that was signed nearly 2 years ago.
I am happy to say that our Congress approved the trade pact. Once the deal is reviewed by the Constitutional Court, the free trade agreement could be ratified in the coming months.
The holdup is mostly on the Colombian side amid concerns among the auto industry there, as a tariff on Korean automobiles will be lifted over a 10-year period. Although the current rate stands at 35%, there is still strong demand for Korean automobiles in Colombia. Of total bilateral trade in 2013, exports of Korean cars and auto parts to Colombia made up more than 80%. Olguin said the concerns within Colombia are manageable, considering that Korean automobiles that come into the country via the U.S. or Mexico come in tariff-free.
Given this situation, I believe the problem related to the auto industry's backlash can be solved.
She added that subsidiaries would be given out to the auto sector to ease concerns. Now, when the bilateral trade pact goes into effect, the Korean market will have cheaper access to Colombia's most popular export items, such as coffee, coal, and metals. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
When couples say their I do's, it makes sense that they mean they're choosing to share their lives together. But in Korea, it often does not necessarily mean that they're choosing to share in the household chores. Our Shin Se-min explains.
A long-lasting, healthy, and happy marriage requires work, real work. But in Korea, at least, most of that work in the home is being done by women. A report from Statistics Korea shows how house chores are distributed among heterosexual married couples above the age of 20 in 12 different countries. Using data from the International Social Survey Program, the survey took 6 different tasks into account, including grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, and caring for family members who are ill. Discrepancies could be seen between the participation rates in each of the 12 countries surveyed. But Korean husbands were second to last in terms of pulling their own weight, behind only their Japanese counterparts. Compared to European hubbies, although many European countries are known to have systems designed to promote gender equality, Korean male spouses are doing just about half the amount of housework. A researcher who helped put the report together says Korean society has a lot to do with it.
The traditional way of thinking still carries on to this day, that males go out and make money while females stay at home and do housework. But if this continues, it won't just stop with the burden of house chores. In a greater picture, it could eventually slow the growing of women's economic participation rate.
Hong acknowledged that more younger Koreans are open to gender role equality compared to their parents' generations. She also added, however, that as the times are changing, so should Korean husbands, especially with more wives now working outside the home in jobs of their own. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Indonesia has located the tail section of the AirAsia plane that crashed in the Java Sea, raising hopes of recovering the black box recorder. And to tell us more, Paul Lee is joining us from the news center. Paul, so this discovery comes 10 days or so after Flight 8501 went missing. Is this the breakthrough that investigators needed to find out what exactly happened to this jet?
Well, officials say it potentially marks a major step in that direction, but recovering the tail section of the aircraft is only half the answer. Forensic teams will now be tasked with salvaging the crucial voice and flight data recorders, which are believed to be still housed inside this piece of debris. Amid improving weather conditions, the massive search operation discovered 12 objects off the coast of Borneo on this Wednesday. Indonesia's chief of national search and rescue said he was sure it was from the AirAsia plane after seeing the company's logo on the underwater wreckage.
We have found a tail of the plane. That has been our main target today. The tail part has been found and confirmed. It was in the second priority search area, not in the main priority area as media reported.
So this is a much welcomed development in an otherwise very tragic accident, one of many air disasters to be exact over this past year. So it looks like the Indonesian government is also taking this incident very seriously by cracking down on this airline industry.
That's right. Indonesia's Transport Ministry announced earlier today that it fired one of its officials and disciplined several others in the wake of this crash. The ministry also said it launched an investigation into the state navigation operator and other airport officials for allowing Flight 8501 to depart without permission. They're also checking all domestic airlines for any flight violations amid allegations that AirAsia violated its permits.
And let's turn to the U.S. now. The government there says Cuba has released several political prisoners as part of an agreement last month to reestablish their diplomatic ties. Paul, Cuba has been widely criticized for its human rights issues, from political freedoms to civil rights. So was this release a way to address those concerns?
Well, the U.S. State Department says it plans to discuss those very issues with the Cuban government later this month in Havana, but stressed that this release was not a precondition. Now, this is leading to speculation that Cuba is taking this potential rebirth of diplomatic relations very seriously. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki made the announcement on Tuesday, saying Washington hopes Cuba will free all 53 detained people who the U.S. regards as political prisoners.
We will continue, of course, to urge the Cuban government to follow through on its commitment. They've already released some of the prisoners. We'd like to see this completed in the near future. And certainly that's something we'll continue to discuss.
In a historic move last month, President Obama announced his administration would seek to normalize relations with Cuba that would end decades of isolation, including trade and direct travel.
And let's shift to Central Asia now. A strange and undiagnosed epidemic is gripping a small village there in rural Kazakhstan. An increasing number of people there keep falling asleep at random for hours, some even for days on end. Are there any clues to what's behind this so-called sleeping sickness?
Well, despite some similar symptoms, doctors there say it's not a narcolepsy. Health officials are trying to identify the cause of this apparent outbreak, which is neither linked to a bacteria or virus. This as local residents say they're terrified of whether or not they'll be able to wake up from this coma-like state. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
1 in 5 residents in a small village in Kazakhstan have been randomly falling asleep, including these children barely able to keep their balance and then dozing off. The first case was registered in spring 2013, and now the number of patients has increased to nearly 700.
I was on my way home from school when I stumbled and fell asleep. My friend helped me up and took me home. Then I can't remember.
Patients have been falling asleep in the middle of the day at school, work, or on the street. Some could not be woken up for a whole week. When they wake up, they suffer from drowsiness, memory loss, and even hallucinations. Doctors say many patients have brain edema, a state in which excessive fluid causes swelling in the brain.
All the kids had a CT scan. There's a diffuse brain edema, but there's no deterioration in terms of neurological symptoms. There's no sign of meningitis.
This is why Kazakhstan's health ministry says it has ruled out a virus or bacterial infection. Many believe the condition is linked to steam seeping out of an unused uranium mine in the area, but experts could not find any evidence. Terrified of this mysterious epidemic, almost 3/4 of the village's residents have agreed to pack up and leave. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And finally, Paul, the latest development in the Ebola crisis. Researchers at Oxford University have begun human testing of a new vaccine to help wipe out this deadly disease. So there's been a few experimental treatments out there aimed at fighting this virus. So how is this one different?
Well, this drug is based on 2 main doses, both of which use the genetic material of an Ebola strain that first appeared back in 1995. Now, initial results in monkeys have shown that this particular vaccine provided complete immune protection against the virus, so it's very promising. Oxford says this latest trial is being conducted on 72 volunteers between the ages of 18 and 50. The developer of the vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, said it hopes to begin a larger trial in Africa and Europe within the next 3 months and have the vaccine ready for use in the affected West African countries by the middle of 2015. This comes as more than 8,000 people have been killed since the outbreak began last year, according to the World Health Organization. Cherry?
Let's hope this can put a break on this outbreak. And thank you so much, Paul, for these stories. And we'll see you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. Hope you are dressed warmly as it's been a freezing cold day nationwide under clear skies for the central regions while clouds hover over Jeju. At the moment, a cold wave watch is in effect for parts of the central regions while dry weather advisories have been extended to more areas along the eastern coast. And brace yourselves as a cold snap will continue. Tomorrow's morning lows here in Seoul should dip to -9 and plunge to below -10 degrees in some places. And there looks to be a big gap in temperatures between the day and night. Nevertheless, conditions will jump back to the seasonal averages by Friday afternoon. On to Thursday's ratings. Seoul will only makes it to 0 in the afternoon. Daegu and Gwangju 6, Busan hits 8. On to other places. Jeju peaks at 8, Dokdo 5, Mount Kumgang dips to -5. Those are the updates we're following at this hour, and I'll be back with more after 10.
Thank you very much, Park Geunhye, and that does it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.